Husband's family forced me to alienate myself and babysit the kids of the family during their yearly family get-together, and husband told me to suck it up because it was a family tradition for the youngest to be excluded, but on my 5th year I had enough and decided to sneak in to get my rightful invite. I didn't expect this to be their annual get-together, and I'm horrified because for the past 5 years, I had played the same role every single summer, the babysitter. While my husband and his family gathered for their so-called family tradition, I was left behind with a house full of children, ensuring they were fed, entertained and put to bed while their parents disappeared for an entire weekend. It had never sat right with me, but every time I tried to question it, my husband would brush me off, telling me I was overthinking things. The first year, I had assumed it was just an unfortunate coincidence. We were newly married, and when my husband told me that his family had a long-standing tradition where the youngest member had to handle childcare, I naively accepted it. He had made it sound like a rite of passage, something that everyone had to go through when they first joined the family. So I went along with it, thinking it was just one weekend. But then the next year rolled around and I was expected to do it again and again and again. It was always the same. His entire extended family, his parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, and cousins would gather at a secret location while I was left behind to watch over their kids. At first, I thought that maybe once another new spouse joined the family, I would be relieved of this duty. But more people had married into the family over the years, and yet, somehow I remained the designated babysitter. It wasn't until this 5th year that it finally dawned on me. This had never been about me being the youngest. It had always been about keeping me away. I had been getting more vocal about it, dropping hints that I was tired of being sidelined, but my husband wasn't interested in hearing my complaints. When I brought it up a few weeks before the trip, he had sighed in exasperation and told me to suck it up because this was just how things were done. I had tried to argue that I was part of the family too and should be included, but he had waved me off, saying that I was overreacting and making a big deal out of nothing. But this time, I wasn't going to just accept it. If they wouldn't tell me what was really happening at these gatherings, then I was going to find out for myself. I started making arrangements in secret. Since I was expected to stay behind and watch the kids, nobody really paid attention to what I was doing. I arranged for a babysitter to come over under the pretense that I had an emergency appointment and needed someone to watch the children. Since my husband and the rest of his family were usually gone for the entire weekend, I knew I would have a decent window of time to follow them without being noticed. The night before they left, I casually asked my husband where they were going this year, pretending to be only mildly curious. He gave me the same vague answer he always did. Just a private family gathering at a traditional spot. I asked for specifics and, as usual, he refused to say. It wasn't just him either. Nobody in his family ever gave me a direct answer. It was always just a family tradition, as if that was enough of an explanation. Well, if they weren't going to tell me, I would find out for myself. The next morning, I played along as usual, pretending I had no issues staying behind. My husband barely gave me a second glance as he grabbed his bag and left, kissing me briefly on the forehead before heading out the door. I watched from the window as he got into the car with his parents and drove off. As soon as they were gone, I put my plan into action. I had been paying attention over the years to the kind of places they drove to, remote areas, usually out of town, places where they wouldn't be easily found. But this time I had a clue. A few nights before, I had seen an email notification pop up on my husband's phone with a booking confirmation. It was only on the screen for a few seconds, but I had caught a glimpse of the location, a private estate in the middle of nowhere. It was expensive too, way too expensive for a simple family gathering. I quickly called the babysitter, making sure she had everything she needed, and then grabbed my keys and left. As I drove, an unsettling feeling crept up my spine. I had been with my husband for 8 years, married for 5, and yet it dawned on me that I knew shockingly little about his family's traditions. It wasn't just the secrecy surrounding these gatherings. There were other things too, the way they always seemed to speak in hushed tones around me, the way they always brushed off my questions, the way my husband, for all his openness about most things, always avoided talking about what went on these trips. And the strangest part? None of the other spouses ever seemed to question it. It was like they either knew something I didn't or had simply accepted that this was how it was going to be. I had asked one of my sister-in-law once, just an offhand comment really, about whether she had ever attended one of these gatherings. She had laughed nervously and changed the subject. That had stuck with me. Now as I drove closer to the location, that uneasy feeling only grew. What if I was about to find out something I didn't want to know? When I arrived, my first thought was that this didn't look like any family reunion I had ever seen. The estate was massive, far more luxurious than I had expected. There were security guards at the entrance dressed in black, monitoring everyone who entered. I had been prepared for this. Dressed in my nicest, most inconspicuous outfit, I walked in confidently, pretending that I belonged there. Security barely glanced at me before letting me through. Once inside, I was even more confused. There was no sign of children running around, no casual family chatter, no picnic tables or friendly banter. Instead, people were walking around in formal attire speaking in hushed tones, their expressions serious. This wasn't just a family gathering. This was something else entirely, and whatever it was, I wasn't supposed to be here. Update 1. Somehow, I can't find my last update. I think I deleted it by mistake. I'll recap here. So the moment I stepped into that estate, I knew I had made a mistake. This wasn't just some family reunion. It felt wrong, deeply wrong. The atmosphere was far too formal, tense even. There were no warm greetings, no laughter, no sense of togetherness. The people inside were mostly men, all dressed in expensive suits, murmuring to each other in hushed voices. Women were present, but they were either sitting quietly off to the side or standing next to certain men, almost like decoration, and none of them looked familiar. Where was my husband? Where were his parents and his siblings? For a brief moment, I considered turning around and leaving. But after 5 years of being deliberately kept in the dark, I had to know what was happening here. I spotted a long corridor leading to another section of the estate. As discreetly as possible, I slipped past the main hall and started making my way down the hallway. That was when I heard my husband's voice. I pressed myself against the wall, peeking through the slightly open door. Inside was a long, polished table surrounded by a group of men, my husband sitting among them. His father was at the head of the table, speaking in a low or forward voice. I couldn't make out everything, but what I did hear made my stomach drop. This wasn't a family gathering. This was a business meeting. No. Not just any business meeting. This was something else entirely. My father-in-law was talking about managing risks and eliminating threats. The tone was too calculated, too controlled for it to be something as simple as business investments. And then I heard my husband's voice, casual, as if he had done this 100 times before. It's already taken care of. The funds were moved last week. Another man, someone older, let out a satisfied good. We don't need another repeat of last year. I had no idea what they were talking about, but every single nerve in my body was screaming at me to get out. I tried to calm myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just an intense business deal. But then my father-in-law said something that made my blood run cold. And what about our loose ends? There was silence. Then my husband spoke again. We took care of it. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I had never heard my husband sound like that before, cold, calculated, detached. This wasn't just some business meeting. I had stumbled into something far worse. I needed to leave now. I turned around quickly, but in my haste I bumped into a side table. The sound was small, barely noticeable, but in that dead silent hallway it might as well have been an explosion. The conversation inside the room immediately stopped. Footsteps. Someone was coming. I ran for my life. Update 2. My heart was pounding so hard. I thought it might burst, but the fear driving me forward was stronger than any exhaustion. I had seen enough. Whatever that meaning was, whatever my husband's family was involved in, I wanted no part of it. The whispers, the tension, the casual way they spoke about removing obstacles. It all clicked into place the moment I saw the papers on the table. I hadn't stuck around to read everything, but I had seen enough. Names, transactions, some sort of list with people's bank details next to unsettling phrases like handled and pending. I wasn't stupid. This wasn't just a business gathering so much for being an above-average accountant. All of them were accountants. I just didn't know for whom, and my husband, the man I trusted, was right in the middle of it. I barely remember how I got out of there. I didn't have time to think. I had to move. I kept my breathing shallow as I silently ran down the hole, keeping close to the wall, my heart pounding in my ears, but I forced myself to stay calm. The stairs were my biggest risk. If I ran into someone, I was done, but luck was on my side. Most of the family was either in that meeting or still enjoying the main event outside. I made it down without being spotted, grabbed my coat from the entrance and slipped out the back door. Once my feet hit the grass, I ran. I didn't care if I looked crazy. I didn't care if someone did see me. I just needed to get away. My car was parked further down the driveway, tucked near the other guests' vehicles. I ran straight for it, fumbling with my keys as I unlocked the door with shaking hands. The moment I was inside, I slammed the lock shut, jammed the key into the ignition and floored it. I didn't even check if anyone had noticed me leaving. I couldn't risk it. By the time I reached the main road, my panic had settled into something worse. I felt trapped. Going home wasn't an option, not when my husband was part of whatever that was. I couldn't go to the police. What would I even say? That my in-laws had a shady meeting and I think I saw something illegal without proof? I sound paranoid at best, and if they did have the kind of power I suspected, going to the police might put me in even more danger. I pulled into a gas station parking lot, my hands gripping the wheels so tightly my knuckles were white. I needed to think. My phone buzzed. I flinched. Husband. I let it ring, then another call and another. I couldn't talk to him. Not yet. Instead, I did the only thing that made sense. I called the one person I knew I could trust. Emily picked up on the second ring. She immediately knew something was wrong. I didn't even need to say much, just that I needed somewhere to stay for the night, that I couldn't go home, and that I'd explain when I got there. She told me to come right over. By the time I pulled into her driveway, I felt like I was on the verge of falling apart. The moment she opened the door and saw my face, she pulled me into a tight hug and didn't ask questions. She just let me inside, locked the door, told me to sit down. I didn't even know where to begin. I told her everything, about how I had been forced to babysit at every family gathering for 5 years, how I had finally had enough and decided to sneak in, and then what I saw. Emily listened in stunned silence. When I finished, she let out a slow breath and said she always had a bad feeling about my husband's family. She never imagined it was this bad, but she wasn't surprised that they had something to hide. She asked me what I planned to do. I didn't have an answer. I was still trying to process everything. She pointed out the obvious. If I went back, my husband would never let me out of his sight again. He had already controlled so much of my life now that I had seen something I wasn't supposed to. It was over. I had to leave for good. Emily convinced me to stay at her place for the night, just in case my husband showed up at our home looking for me. Update 3. As expected, the next morning he did. My phone was flooded with messages. Some were concerned, others were angry. He asked why the kids were left with the babysitter and where I was, so they hadn't seen me. I sighed in relief. What he didn't know wouldn't hurt him, but it sure as hell would hurt me. And obviously, Emily is a fake name. You think I would use real names in this situation? I literally woke up at Emily's place feeling like I had barely slept. My body was exhausted, but my mind hadn't let me rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of that room, papers scattered on the table, the serious expressions, the weight of something sinister hanging in the air. I had gotten out. That was the only thing keeping me from spiraling completely. I was out, but I wasn't free yet. I stared at my phone, which I had stupidly turned back on. I shouldn't have looked. I knew better, but curiosity got the best of me. A flood of missed calls and messages from my husband filled the screen. I braced myself and started reading. He wasn't furious about me disappearing overnight. He wasn't even worried about me. His first message was about the babysitter. Did I seriously just leave the kids with the babysitter? More followed. This is the most selfish thing you've ever done. You know the youngest gets fussy at night and you just took off. What were you thinking? The audacity of it nearly made me laugh. I had left a house full of his family, a babysitter they usually hired, and he was acting like I had abandoned children in the middle of nowhere. All messages came in. You need to grow up. You always overreact to everything. You embarrass me by pulling a stunt like this. Everyone is asking where you are. I have to cover for you again. And then the final one before he stopped texting me altogether, come home and fix this. You can't just walk out when things don't go your way. I stared at my phone, my grip tightening. Not one message asking if I was okay. Not one hint of concern about why I left. It was all about him, about his embarrassment, his inconvenience, his reputation. I was done. I must have made a noise because Emily poked her head in the guest room. She was holding a coffee mug, already knowing I needed caffeine before I did. She handed it to me, shaking her head as she sat on the edge of the bed. Let me guess. Let me guess. He's not mad that you left him, just mad that you left his responsibility behind. I took a long sip before answering. Pretty much. He doesn't care that I left. Just that I made him look bad. She scoffed. Typical. He's always treated you like an afterthought. That was true. I had spent years being sidelined. I was treated as someone who just needed to go along with what his family wanted. I had been conditioned to believe it was normal, that being treated like an outsider was just part of marrying in. But now that I had stepped out of it, now that I was looking at it clearly, it was insulting. She looked at me closely before speaking again. You're not going back, right? I exhaled slowly. I don't think I can, even if I wanted to. That was the truth. If I went back, my husband would never let me out of his sight again. His family would make sure of it. And if they found out what I saw, I didn't even want to think about what they might do. Emily was already ahead of me. She pulled out her laptop and opened a new tab. You need to secure your finances first, she said, clicking through a few websites. If you have any joint accounts with him, get your name off them or withdraw whatever is yours. If the house is in his name, don't count on it being yours. And if you're serious about leaving, you need a lawyer. She made it sound so simple. But I had spent years tied to this man, to this family, to their expectations. The thought of untangling myself from all of it made my head spin. I don't even know where to start, I admitted. She clicked something and turned the screen towards me. Start by transferring your paycheck into a separate account and call a divorce lawyer. I found a few in town who specialize in cases like this. I stared at the names on the screen. It was real. It was happening. I was leaving for good. I wasn't stupid. I knew my husband wouldn't just let me walk away. And sure enough, later that afternoon, Emily's doorbell rang. My stomach dropped. She checked the peephole and turned to me with a knowing look. It's him. I forced myself to take a breath. I'm not opening it. She nodded approvingly. Good. Because I wasn't going to let you. My phone buzzed again. A new message. I'm at Emily's. Open the door. I didn't reply. Seconds later, another one. This is ridiculous. We need to talk. I deserve an explanation. I almost responded, but then I remembered I had given him explanations before for years. Every time he dismissed my feelings, every time he let his family treat me like an outsider, every time he forced me into roles I didn't want, and every time he made me feel like I was the problem. Not this time. I let the messages sit. Emily stayed by the door, waiting until we heard his car pull away. When he was finally gone, she turned to me. You really need to file for divorce. I swallowed hard. I know. And for the first time, I meant it. That night, I did what I should have done a long time ago. I filed for divorce. Emily helped me find a lawyer and set up a consultation. We went through all the logistics, what assets were in my name, what wasn't, how to protect myself financially, and then I sent my husband one last message. We have nothing to talk about. I'll be in touch through my lawyer. Then I blocked his number. There was no going back now. I had spent 5 years letting myself be excluded from their so-called tradition, 5 years convincing myself that my feelings didn't matter, 5 years playing the perfect quiet wife. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I was done being the caretaker. I was done sucking it up. Update 4. I didn't answer his calls. I didn't open the door when he showed up again. I didn't acknowledge his existence in any way, and that was killing him. I had spent 5 years playing the obedient patient wife, the one who was always supposed to compromise, always supposed to understand, always supposed to wait, but I wasn't waiting anymore. I was done. And the moment he realized that I wasn't going to cry, wasn't going to ask for a divorce, but demanded, that's when the real fight began. My lawyer had warned me that he might not take it well, that men like him, men who thrived on control, often refused to accept that they no longer had control. She was right, because the second he got served with the divorce papers, the explosion began. The text started slow, just like jabs at first. You're being dramatic. This is ridiculous. We just need to talk. Then they escalated. I won't let you throw this marriage away over one fight. I'm your husband. You don't just get to leave. I ignored all of it. That's when the call started. Emily and I were eating dinner when my phone vibrated against the table for the 10th time that night. She glanced at the screen and sighed. It's him again. I didn't even look. Just hit decline. Emily raised an eyebrow. Aren't you even a little curious about what he has to say? I shook my head. I already know. He's going to demand I come back. Tell me I'm overreacting, maybe even throw in an apology that means nothing. She hummed, clearly impressed. And you don't want to hear it? I stabbed a piece of my food. I don't want anything from him. And that was the truth. The next day, my lawyer called with an update. He's furious, she told me, her voice calm and professional. He's insisting that you won't get a divorce. I rubbed my temple. That's not how this works. She sighed. He's making it clear that he thinks you need him, that if you take time to cool down, you'll see this as a mistake. I nearly laughed. He really thought I was going to come back. I sat up straighter. Tell him he can keep his money. I don't want anything from him. There was a pause on the other end. Are you sure? You're legally entitled to. I cut her off. I don't want his house. I don't want alimony. I don't want anything. I just want him gone. She exhaled, clearly trying to remain neutral. Well, that's certainly going to make the process easier, but I need you to understand that walking away with nothing means you. I know what it means, I said firmly, but I don't need anything from him. I just want my freedom. She seemed to accept that. All right, I'll communicate that to him. I didn't expect him to take it well, and I was right. That night, Emily shook me awake. Hey, wake up. I blinked groggily. What? She held out my phone. He left a voicemail on my number and you should probably hear it. I snatched it from her and played the message on speaker. His voice was practically shaking with fury. "You're being stupid. You think you could just walk away from 5 years of marriage like it's nothing? You think you don't need me? Fine. Be alone. See how well you do on your own." There was a pause as if he was trying to calm himself down. "You're not getting this divorce. You hear me? I won't let you." Emily scoffed. "He won't let you? Who does he think he is?" I stared at the phone, my chest tight. I should have been scared. I should have felt trapped, but all I felt was relief because his anger meant one thing. He knew he was losing. I met with my lawyer the next day and she didn't waste any time. "He's refusing to sign the papers," she said flatly, "but that doesn't mean he can stop the divorce." I frowned. "So what now?" She leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. "Now we file for divorce without his consent." I blinked. "That's an option." She nodded. "In this state, if one spouse refuses to cooperate, you can file based on abandonment. After a few years of separation, the court will grant it regardless of his feelings." A slow grin spread across my face. "So you're saying, even if he refuses to let me go, I'll still get the divorce?" "Exactly." I exhaled sharply. It was done. Maybe not immediately, but legally, he couldn't stop me. No matter how much he raged, no matter how much he begged, he had no control over me anymore. That night, I got one final message from him. One last desperate attempt to pull me back in. "This is your last chance. You come home, we fix this or you lose me forever." I stared at it for a long time, then I blocked his number. I didn't want a last chance. I didn't want him. I had spent years begging for his approval. And now for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't need it anymore. Update 5. Plunking his number didn't stop him. It just changed his strategy. Since he couldn't reach me directly, he sent his family after me. It started with his mother. She called from an unfamiliar number and I stupidly picked up. Without even a hello, she demanded to know what nonsense this was about a divorce. I sighed, already exhausted. It wasn't nonsense. I didn't want to be married to him anymore. She scoffed at that, telling me I couldn't just decide something like that. Marriage was forever. Maybe for her, I said, but I had wasted enough of my life on him. She gasped like I had just slapped her across the face. She snapped that I owed him, that he had taken care of me for years, given me everything, and now I was just going to throw him away like trash. I laughed at that. He took care of me? What exactly did he take care of? There was a pause before she said that he provided. I shook my head. No, he isolated me. He treated me like a servant. He let his family walk all over me, and now that I had finally had enough, he was acting like I was the villain? She huffed, saying she had always known I was selfish, but this was disgusting. I was just proving that I had never been a real part of their family. That hit something deep in me, a sharp twist in my chest. But then I took a deep breath and let it go. I told her she was right. I never was. Then I hung up and blocked her number too. Over the next few weeks, the attacks kept coming. His sister sent me a string of texts all furious. I had ruined him. I had humiliated him. I was a heartless. His cousin texted me vague Facebook statuses about how some people didn't know the meaning of loyalty. His best friend messaged me pretending to be neutral, saying he just didn't understand what happened, we had been so happy. I didn't reply because we weren't happy. He was happy. I was just trapped. And the best part? He was doing all of this because he knew he was losing. Then came the real shock. My lawyer called me one afternoon with news. He was contesting the divorce. I could practically hear her rolling her eyes. I groaned. Of course he was. She sighed, but then added that here was the kicker. He was trying to claim I abandoned the marriage. I actually laughed at that. He wanted to argue that I abandoned him. She hummed in confirmation, explaining that he was saying that by moving out, I had left him no choice, that I hadn't given him a chance to fix things. I shook my head, and the fact that I had told him for years that I was unhappy, the fact that he had refused to change. She clicked her tongue. None of that mattered to him. He just wanted to drag this out. I gritted my teeth. That was exactly what he wanted, to make this as painful as possible, to make me regret leaving him, but I wasn't going to break. I was ready for this fight. I know a lot of you are asking about the family tradition. I am requesting you to please stop. I've already deleted that part like my lawyer advised me to. Please delete your comments. Let's act like it never happened, please, edit. He is refusing to back down.